The Long Road Ahead, a short and adorable paper cutout art style horror game with an urban legend feel that reminds me of Yami Shibai. True story, I tried recording footage for this game 3 different times, and each time it would not work correctly. I'd get some footage, maybe, near the start, but once we got close to the haunted road, nothing. Almost as if the game itself is a little bit haunted. That or my software is ancient and kind of not good. All things for me to work on. Basically, I had to give up the first reaction recording Let's Play angle, but I still wanted to talk about it, at least a bit, because there's a lot of fun, cute things about this spooky little story. And thus began my frustrating journey to obtain working footage without ripping from someone else's playthrough. The footage I did finally get, I had to obtain recording with my phone. At night. In the dark. Alone. I kid you not, toward the end of recording that final video, I literally felt something in the room with me. It was my dog, obviously, famously freaking me out way worse than any horror game ever will. Try creeping around a survival horror game setting when your dog decides it's a great time to nudge you with a cold wet nose, or else start randomly and suddenly barking at something when it's around 11 at night. You'd jump too, don't lie. The game advertises itself as a short creepy tale as told by Cellar Vault Games. Inspired by Chinese culture, it tells the tale of Liang and Ying as they travel back to Liang's hometown. But their journey is disturbed by a strange and stalking shadowy presence. Or rather, the couple decide to take a suspicious shortcut on their way to his parents' house, and things predictably do not go well. The actual gameplay is pretty straightforward, but the atmosphere is everything, and it is perfectly unnerving. As the couple argue over taking the path to the small telltale hiccups they encounter on the way, I thoroughly enjoyed the spooky atmosphere, and the fact it was a pretty short, creepy game makes it really accessible, and I liked that a lot. A while back, I took a look at another even shorter little game where you're just trying to close a garage door, make sure it's closed. Both of these games use very limited setting and atmosphere to make a chill creep up your spine, and I think both manage that very well. The main difference would be the very folkloric, local urban legend, spooky story feel that saturates The Long Road Ahead. If that sounds like a fun way to spend around 10 minutes, I recommend it. It's pretty great. Link is in the description. Bye-bye. No, seriously, anything I have to say, you will intuitively get from the game itself, so go play it. But if you're still here, I'm going to assume you already played the game. Cool. So you probably already know how much I want to talk about the folkloric elements that set this one apart. No matter where you live or where you frequent, chances are there are certain roads, paths, or places that friends and family will warn you to stay away from, or to stay away during specific hours at least. Ignoring some of the real-world reasons that certain places can be dangerous for people and/or certain people and/or at specific times, this is a common trope of fairy tale and folklore, inclusive of the urban legend and spooky, scary, creepy stories. Oftentimes there's a monster or a trial or a trap or a test. And because so many of the details are unknown, and the most anyone does know is that people that go there end up dead or missing, it's just a place to avoid, or enter at your own peril. Spoilers for the entire plotline of The Long Road Ahead. This is the inciting incident and crux of the creepy story. The young couple, Liang and Ying, go more or less willingly, and of their own volition, into the danger zone. At the very start, the young couple is already traveling together by bike, and it is apparent from the darkness around them that it is very late at night. Already a not wholly comfy situation, despite the streetlights. It's dark out, and there aren't many people. Ying even points out it's dangerous to travel this late at night, while Liang mentions how overtime and their car breaking down made their circumstances what they are. But he made a promise that they'd make it to his mother's birthday. Filial piety is a huge part of the culture, and that aspect alone lends incredible credence to the normally foolish decision characters can take in these situations. But given the strength of family relationships, a promise, your mother's birthday, it's easy to understand why it's so important for Liang, and why Ying really only makes a token resistance to the route that we, the horror-savvy viewer, know is unwise. So, one way or another, They're going to his parents' house tonight, but it's not like Liang is unconcerned about the late hour and the time it will take, and assuring his girlfriend, he mentions a shortcut right before they stop for gas. At the petrol station, their conversation continues, and the dialogue is wonderful in telling the story, characterizing Ying and Liang, a cautious worrier and a laid-back realist respectively, while also giving us all the explanation for how and why the story unfolds the way it does. Ying has already guessed about Liang's intended shortcut, but he can't be talking about that abandoned road, right? Oh, of course he is.
Haven't you heard the stories?
Despite the dark night, the obvious late hour, and their situation, Ying is hesitant and reluctant about the shortcut Liang suggests. Instead, she warns her boyfriend against this idea, since the shortcut is using the long, dark road, which, according to Ying, is a well-known road where people have frequently gone missing. Even aside from the idea of malevolent spirits, certain places and certain times to avoid locations due to legitimate missing persons or, harm having come to people at that location is usually enough to deter a lot of people. Liang is initially dismissive of Ying's concerns, calling it superstitious, the usual response, before she points out it's still an unnecessary chance when the road itself is very dark and narrow. Sounds like it's probably difficult to drive on. But Liang wants to arrive before midnight so his parents won't worry, saying that taking the highway would take them longer and they'd arrive after on the highway? Are you sure? There should be no traffic this time of night. I don't get this reasoning, but even saying that's all true, this still gives some idea of exactly how late they're out here traveling in the dark. It's somewhere approaching midnight, the witching hour, and the couple needs to arrive before the clock strikes 12. Certain ominous aspects are already present in the story, reminding us of other tales with similar elements. You probably already recognize the common set pieces that begin many horror stories. The warning and the dismissal of said warning. Because usually we don't have our creepy story if the characters don't stray into the unknown, or if they don't ignore the warnings they received before wandering into danger. Again, when people share stories of places to avoid, there may well be more than just spirits at work. It's inadvisable to wander in abandoned buildings since it may no longer be architecturally sound. Damage to the structure may make it unsafe to just walk down a hallway if your foot could crash through rotting floorboards. There may be dangerous insects or animals that have taken up residence in the rot and decay. Disease and malady may spread more easily from the filth and refuse left behind. Ying's concern about broken streetlights and even potholes is very valid. Liang also mentions that he's more worried about thieves and robbers than spirits. Yeah, he says that, but isn't that exactly the concern with the dark long road? As a shortcut, if people have gone missing when they used it, seems like an obvious place to avoid just because it may have real issues, and that's even if you don't go in for the supernatural angle. But naturally, they're going to ignore all that, and Ying eventually goes along with this as well, just hoping that they'll be very careful. However, there's another part of the legend around the road that's introduced here at this point. You must never look back when driving on this road, not even with your side mirror. I'm sure everyone will at least recall the tale of Orpheus and Eurydice. Thank you, Hadestown, for making the story mainstream. But if we remember anything from that story, it's that inevitably, if you must not look back is a rule, that rule will be broken. Someone will look back, and upon doing so, the wish for freedom from the underworld will not be granted. In short, the rule itself does not bode well for our young couple Ying and Liang. They finish fueling up at the petrol station before they leave. Interesting to note you have to move to pick up Liang's wallet before you can go pay and return to fuel. I'm sure that's not an important detail, though, so why did I mention it? Well, we'll get to that. So they finish fueling, finish talking, and then they've already passed the point of no return. They have entered the dark, long road. From the start, we know things are different, and even Liang notes that the road is really dark. It isn't well lit by the streetlights. Then, Ying asks if the air seems colder. Liang points out the obvious. They're on a motorbike, it's late at night, and it's a dark road. Right, why would it be anything but a little cold out? Then, a moment later, something shocks and scares Ying so badly she shouts and shakes, and Liang reacts, nearly losing control of the bike and crashing, which would have killed them both. Liang appears to recover the bike, but Ying insists she saw something. Liang points out the earlier rule that said they shouldn't look back. Establishment and reminder. We're going through the steps quickly now. The couple refocus on quietly and quickly getting through and off the road. Reaching the end is the only way forward, after all. However, as Liang's expression shifts, he asks if Ying can see the same lights ahead of them. Weirdly enough, as long as they've been speeding along, the lights at the end appear no closer than they were 5 minutes ago. You know, as if they are stuck in place. As familiar and terrifying as a nightmare you may have had a long time ago, for all you run and flail and move, climbing the mountain, running up the hill, or down the hall. Somehow, the space seems to stretch or reorder itself. You're on a treadmill, stuck in a rat wheel. For all your effort and labor, you are no closer to the goal. The endless corridor or the endless road or tunnel is common enough in horror media, so much so that I thought there was a Junji Ito story that included that. Couldn't find it, maybe it still exists somewhere, but still a known and inexplicable phenomenon indicative of the supernatural and something malicious. So Liang makes the best suggestion, and by that I mean the worst. Yes, clearly they should stop and mark a streetlight to make sure that they're not actually stuck in place. No, why would you? No. Even Ying doesn't think it's a good idea. But hey, they just have to not look back, right? This should be fine. Really? Are you sure, Liang? A dark, dangerous road, but you want to stop and be sure. But that's what they do. In the middle of nowhere, thick with darkness, the belly of the beast. At an old streetlight, they stop. And don't think it's lost on me that Liang starts off facing back the way they came and towards the left. Why? Well, maybe it's nothing. Surely the gameplay section doesn't actually count, and that's why I can walk any which way, and it's all totally and completely fine. Sure, let's say that's the case. So they stop, and Liang takes a moment to scratch some markings into the street lamp. No sooner does he manage this than Ying sees something again. And we get to see it too. A lantern. The kind seen during the Chinese Ghost Festival, or the Hungry Ghost Festival, shimmers out of the darkness. A different kind of image than the paper craft style so far, marking it out as something inherently different, otherworldly. It shifts and gleams in midair, just past Liang's shoulder, and he asks, "What's wrong? What are you looking at?" She says it's nothing and insists they move on quickly. Let's just get out of here. Somehow after this, they actually do reach the end of the dark, long road. For a moment, it seems like things will all be okay. They made it through. That's great. Now they can finally breathe and talk freely about what Ying saw back there. She admits what scares her was something similar to what she saw while he was marking the streetlight, and mentions that he may have dropped his wallet back there. So it wasn't just a gameplay thing that we had to pick up his wallet before paying at the petrol station. This is something he just does, accidentally dropping his... Well, that's okay. After that strange experience, I'm sure they'll just call his credit card companies to cancel and resend the cards, and he can just reapply to get a copy of his driver's license, and no. Apparently they're going to drive back to the already marked streetlight and get his wallet back. Well, I guess Liang didn't see the apparition back there, but surely Ying will object more this time since she actually saw something, so nope. No argument, or otherwise, they went back. They returned to the dark, long road. I'm inclined to file this under too stupid to live at this point. They arrive back at the streetlight they marked. Liang doesn't seem to notice anything, while Ying apparently thinks to herself how she doesn't remember it being this close to the end of the road, but all she says is for Liang to be careful. Again, in the gameplay section, It looks like we can just ignore that we can turn all the way around, but apparently avoid the don't look back clause. Liang retrieves his wallet, and they quickly drive off to return to the main road, making a U-turn. I'm sure that doesn't count. As they drive back past the streetlight, their bike's headlight crosses the streetlight and illuminates two figures standing just off the road behind the streetlight. As the couple drive off into the night, the camera pans back to see the figures move past the streetlight to the road, and they appear to turn and follow the young couple. And here, at the end of the story, their true fate remains unknown. The camera sweeps upward to view the credits, floating amid the distant and sprawling city lights and the mirage-like ghostly lanterns, the same as the kind from the Ghost Festival. All shimmer in and out of view as we continue to float skyward, as if we too are a spirit drifting up to the clouds and stars. And then a bit of joss paper, the imitation money burned at the festival to give to deceased ancestors, flies into view to mark this as the end. It burns away, just like it would at the festival, and provides socials and other messages from the developer. I also really appreciate how the jump scare was saved for post-credits like this. That's just really thoughtful. The story itself focuses more on the building atmosphere and tension, the series of events and possible missteps and transgressions that are part of the horror scenario, the creepy ghost story. Steeped in this folklore atmosphere tied with certain aspects of the Chinese Hungry Ghost Festival, and where every step harkens to a myriad of other stories, all primed to heighten tension and instill a certain expectation. I said their fate was unknown, but since reaching the end without a final jump scare, you might think, that was the end, so surely the couple made it back out again. They managed to avoid anything all that bad, right? And that's the end of the creepy story, so their fate's not unknown. They made it out, just like they did earlier. Everything is fine. You're wrong. Haven't you been paying attention? They did look back. They went back. As if stopping to mark the streetlight wasn't bad enough. And maybe this too was all part of some malicious phantasm's plan. There is a large enough gap between the introduction of the rule and the soon after reminder that maybe you forgot. Maybe we forgot. You must never look back, not even with your side mirror. They were warned. They took the path anyway. It turns out there were monsters, spirits, waiting in the darkness. The dark long road was a trial, a gauntlet for their growing unease. It tested them, their courage, their patience, and when they made it through, only the trap remained. His wallet. They proved steadfast and resourceful in the tricks that spirits play, but somehow they did well. They emerged. The spirits took something else in exchange, and the trap was made. In what story do the heroes ever brave the same deadly circumstances and succeed twice? Never. The truth is, they did break that rule. They made it out once. This gave them a false sense of complacency that everything is fine, normal actually. But it isn't. We knew that. And by the time they reached safety, they should have known that too. They should have known better. But they fell for the trap and returned. Partway through, as part of the plan, they turned back. They looked back. Once they made a U-turn, you still think that doesn't count? How can you drive forward without looking, after all? I doubt it's as semantic as don't look back, meaning only relative to the direction your body is facing at the time. The truth is, after they retrieve the wallet and turn around, we finally get a more concrete view of the supernatural entities that stalk to them. The two figures who may have been there the whole time. The cold and daunting presence that followed them from the start. Now free to follow, because the young couple looked back the way they'd come in the second time. Lulled into a false sense of security, the game ends, and we don't get to see or know if they truly made it back out after that. At this point, right before the credits, The only thing that's confirmed is that there were indeed spirits watching the couple the whole time. Do you really think that hungry ghosts wouldn't scheme to trap the pair? Was there something to that initial sighting that nearly killed them? Since they made it out once, it's likely they didn't die at the first sighting, but considering Ying's second sighting at the streetlight, isn't this when the spirits may have caused Liang to drop his wallet again? Or maybe it was an honest mistake. We did see it at the petrol station at the beginning. Maybe this is something he's just prone to do. The ending is a relief for the player, but if you think about it, it's just the start of an even worse night for Liang and Ying. Because they did look back. They had to. In a way that's almost orchestrated. The spirits are following them now. They may have survived the first time through, but the second? At best, it's open-ended. Otherwise, we know what happened. It's foreshadowed even at the very start. Ying says she doesn't want to end up on the news, but they probably will. They aren't making it out of there again. They broke the rule, without even really thinking about it either. What will his parents think? We know they'll worry. They'll probably be the ones that call the police. From the petrol station with the attendant as witness, they went down the dark long road. The authorities may investigate insofar as they're willing and able, and then it will be another missing persons case, like the many cases before that Ying mentioned at the start. I can't imagine those ominous figures that followed after them just let the couple go. They appear reminiscent of jiangshi,
Jiangshi.
Chinese vampire or zombie that has several cute artistic renditions associated with the Hungry Ghost Festival. It would make sense if the Dark Long Road was indeed a cemetery originally, since jiangshi are also supposedly associated with the practice of transporting corpses back to their hometown for burial. I'm sure the fact Ying and Liang are headed back to his hometown, per the summary, is purely a coincidence. Or perhaps not. I can't imagine that the road that can warp and stretch will let them leave a second time. The Dark Long Road, the long road ahead. I think the title gives it away in the end and in hindsight. Regardless of how, these two did end up spirited off into the ether. As Ying feared, they will be added to the long list of missing persons. And they're going to be on that dark long road for a very long time now. And cyclically speaking, since they're not getting out anytime soon, well, you could say it's a long road ahead. That's my take anyway. And the logical flow given all the context clues and callbacks to legend and folklore and basic horror story structure. But what's a game that you thought had fun folkloric aspects to it? Or alternatively, what's your favorite urban legend spooky story? I'm sure we've all encountered forbidden places where locals in your hometown will warn people away from. In my case, it was this big gulch and creek that ran between a neighborhood and apartment complex. Lots of trash discarded and debris. Tetanus was a concern. Kids were warned off playing there. Not that it deterred everyone. More recently, there actually is an older road close to where I live where the streetlights don't work. City should really do something about that. It is a safety issue. But anyway, was or is there anything similar in your area? I wish there was something as neat and spooky as a haunted bridge or house full of ghosts. But sometimes reality can be more mundane. Sometimes it's weirder than fiction. But that's where folklore comes from in a way. Sometimes we need to heed the warnings around us. Sometimes it really is for our own good. For safety. So we can survive another day. Sometimes we should fear the dark. Avoid danger. Survive. It's a long road ahead.